The morning sun painted golden streaks across the cobblestone streets of London as 8-year-old Emma Martinez walked hand in hand with her mother, Sophia. Emma's bright purple backpack bounced with each step, decorated with colorful patches that her grandmother had sewn on during their last visit to Mexico. The little girl had Down syndrome, but her spirit shined brighter than any crown jewel housed in the Tower of London. Sophia had saved for months to bring Emma on this dream vacation, working double shifts as a cleaning lady in their small Texas town. She had counted every penny, dreaming of the day she could show her daughter the castles and palaces she had only seen in picture books. Emma had been fascinated by princesses and royal families since she was tiny, often pretending to wave like Queen Elizabeth from their apartment balcony. As they approached Buckingham Palace, Emma's eyes grew wide with wonder. The massive iron gates stood like guardians protecting a magical world beyond. Hundreds of tourists crowded around the entrance, cameras clicking and voices chattering in dozens of languages. The red-coated guards stood perfectly still, their tall black hats making them look like toy soldiers come to life. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at the palace. "Mama, is the Queen really in there?" she asked in her sweet, slightly slurred speech that Sophia understood perfectly. Her daughter had been working hard with speech therapists back home, and every word was a small victory. Sophia smiled, brushing a strand of Emma's dark hair from her forehead. "Maybe she is, mija. This is her home." They joined the crowd of visitors pressed against the railings, everyone hoping to catch a glimpse of royalty or witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony. The tourists around them were typical sightseers, families with children, elderly couples with guidebooks, teenagers taking selfies, but Sophia noticed how some people stared at Emma, their expressions ranging from curious to uncomfortable. She had grown used to these looks over the years, but they still stung. Emma, however, remained blissfully unaware, her attention completely captured by the palace before her. A security barrier had been set up about 20 feet from the main gate, keeping the public at a safe distance. Emma pressed her face against the metal railing, her small hands gripping the bars as she tried to get a better view. She began waving enthusiastically at the palace windows, as if the Queen might appear and wave back. "Your Majesty," Emma called, out in her cheerful voice, causing several tourists to chuckle. "I came to visit you from very far away." Her innocent excitement was infectious, and soon other children nearby were waving too. Sophia felt her heart swell with pride and sadness. Emma saw the world with such pure joy, unburdened by the complexities that adults carried. She didn't understand that queens don't typically come out to greet individual visitors, or that palace security exists for serious reasons. To Emma, this was simply a magical place where a real princess lived, and she was being polite by announcing her arrival. The crowd continued to grow as the morning progressed. Tour groups arrived with their guides holding colorful flags, street performers set up nearby hoping to earn tips from the tourists, and vendors sold miniature Union Jack flags and postcards. The atmosphere was festive but controlled, with police officers and palace security maintaining a watchful presence. Emma's enthusiasm never wavered. She continued her one-sided conversation with the palace, telling the Queen about her airplane ride, her hotel room with the fancy soap, and her collection of princess books at home. Other tourists began to smile and take pictures, charmed by the little girl's genuine excitement. As they stood there, Sophia couldn't help but think about their journey to this moment. The doctors who had initially delivered Emma's diagnosis with such clinical coldness, the teachers who had doubted her daughter's potential, the strangers who sometimes treated Emma as if she were invisible. But here, surrounded by the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, Emma was simply a little girl living her dream. The morning grew warmer, and Sophia was about to suggest they find some shade when something extraordinary began to unfold. A commotion near the palace gates caught their attention, and the crowd began to murmur with excitement. The rigid formation of the guards seemed to shift slightly, though they maintained their professional composure. Emma had noticed something too. She pointed toward the gate, her voice filled with wonder. "Mama, look, something special is happening." Sophia followed her daughter's gaze, not yet realizing that this ordinary tourist visit was about to become a memory that would last a lifetime. The palace that had seemed so distant and untouchable was about to open its arms to one very special little girl, in a way that no guidebook could have predicted. Officer James Wellington had been serving in the Queen's Guard for 7 years, but he had never experienced a morning quite like this one. Standing at his post near the main palace gates, he had noticed the enthusiastic little girl almost immediately. Her joyful waves and cheerful calls to the Queen had brought smiles to the faces of his fellow guards, though they maintained their stoic expressions as protocol demanded. James was different from the typical image people had of royal guards. Behind the red tunic and bearskin hat was a man who had grown up in a working-class family in Manchester, the youngest of 4 children. His older brother, Michael, had autism, and James had spent his childhood learning patience, understanding, and the importance of seeing beyond disabilities to the person within. As Emma continued her animated conversation with the palace, James found himself fighting back a smile. Her pure joy reminded him so much of Michael's excitement whenever they visited their local football stadium. There was something magical about witnessing someone experience wonder without any barriers or self-consciousness. The crowd was growing, larger, and James noticed how some tourists were now paying more attention to Emma than to the palace itself. A few people had started recording videos, clearly touched by her genuine enthusiasm. Her mother stood beside her, protective yet proud, occasionally translating Emma's Spanish words for curious bystanders. Then something unexpected happened. A small red ball, probably from a child's toy, rolled across the street and came to rest, near the security barrier just out of Emma's reach. She pointed to it excitedly, clearly wanting to retrieve it. Without thinking, she ducked under the barrier rope. "Emma, no!" Sophia called out, reaching for her daughter, but Emma was already several steps beyond the security line. The moment froze. Other guards tensed, radio chatter increased, and tourists held their breath. This was exactly the kind of situation that required immediate action. Palace security protocols were clear. Unauthorized personnel beyond the barriers needed to be stopped immediately. But James saw something others might have missed. Emma wasn't running toward the palace with any intent to cause trouble. She was simply reaching for the red ball, completely unaware that she had crossed into restricted territory. Her movements were slow and deliberate, characteristic of her condition, and her expression showed only innocent curiosity. As other security personnel began moving toward the situation, James made a decision that would define not just his career, but his understanding of what true service meant. Instead of immediately restraining Emma or calling for backup, he took a step forward and gently called out to her. "Hello there, young lady," he said in his warmest voice, breaking protocol by speaking while on duty. "I believe you're looking for this ball." Emma looked up at the tall guard with wide eyes, momentarily startled by his height and uniform, but something in his gentle tone put her at ease. "Yes, please," she said politely, just as her mother had taught her. It rolled away from the other children. James carefully picked up the ball and walked toward Emma, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd watched in stunned silence as one of the Queen's guards approached a little girl who had breached security. Other officers paused, waiting to see how James would handle the situation. "This is a very nice ball," James said, kneeling down to Emma's eye level, his formal uniform creating a stark contrast with his gentle demeanor. "But this area is special. It's where the Queen lives, so we have to be very careful about who comes close." Emma nodded seriously, absorbing this information. "I didn't mean to go where I shouldn't," she said, her speech careful and measured. "I just wanted to help return the ball to the children." In that moment, James saw not a security threat, but a child with a kind heart who had simply wanted to help others. He looked back toward the crowd where Sophia stood with her hands pressed to her heart, clearly worried about what might happen to her daughter. "What's your name?" James asked Emma, still kneeling beside her. "Emma Martinez," she replied proudly. "I came from Texas to visit the Queen. My mama saved lots of money for our trip." James glanced toward Sophia, who was now being questioned by other security officers. He could see the fear in her eyes, not just concern for Emma's immediate safety, but worry about ruining their dream vacation, possible legal consequences, or being banned from the palace grounds. "Emma," James said gently, "would you like to walk back to your mama with me? And maybe, if you're very good, I can show you something special." Emma's face lit up with excitement. "Something special? Like what the Queen might see?" James smiled, knowing that what happened next would either be remembered as a beautiful act of compassion or a serious breach of protocol. But looking at Emma's trusting face and thinking of his brother Michael, he knew there was only one choice he could make. "Something like that," he said, offering Emma his white-gloved hand. "But first, we need to make sure your mama knows you're safe." As they began walking back toward the barrier, James realized that this moment would change not just Emma's day, but his entire understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. Sometimes the most important security wasn't about keeping people out, it was about keeping humanity in. The crowd of tourists watched in amazement as the tall guard in his magnificent red uniform walked hand in hand with little Emma back toward the security barrier. What had started as a potential security incident was transforming into something beautiful and unexpected. Camera phones were recording every moment, but the atmosphere felt respectful rather than intrusive. Sophia's relief was visible as her daughter approached safely. She had been questioned by 2 other security officers who were trying to understand how Emma had gotten past the barriers so easily. When they saw James bringing Emma back with such care and gentleness, their stern expressions softened considerably. "Mama!" Emma called out excitedly as they reached the barrier. "This nice guard helped me get the ball back to the children, and he says he might show me something special." Sophia looked uncertain, glancing between her daughter and James. She had heard stories about strict palace security and worried that Emma might still be in trouble. "I'm so sorry," she said to James in accented English. She didn't mean any harm. She just wanted to help. James removed his tall bearskin hat, revealing brown hair and kind eyes that immediately put Sophia at ease. "Please don't apologize," he said warmly. "Emma was being helpful, and that's a wonderful quality. My name is James, and I have a brother, very much like Emma. He sees the world with the same joy and kindness." The other security officers exchanged glances. James was taking an unusual approach, but they could see that the situation was under control. The crowd was calm, Emma was safe, and there was something genuinely moving about watching this interaction unfold. Emma tugged on James's red sleeve. "You have a brother like me?" she asked with curiosity. "I do," James replied. "His name is Michael, and he loves football and chocolate biscuits and making people laugh, just like you seem to love making people smile." Meanwhile, word of the unusual situation had reached the palace communications office. Sarah Chen, the Queen's deputy private secretary, had been monitoring the security reports when she noticed the commotion at the main gate. Instead of just reading a dry incident report, she decided to step outside and see what was happening for herself. From her position on the palace steps, Sarah could see the crowd gathered around the barrier and the uniformed guard speaking with a small child. She had worked for the royal family for 12 years and had seen countless interactions between security and the public, but this one felt different. There was something about the guard's posture and the way the crowd was responding that caught her attention. Sarah approached one of the senior security supervisors. "What's the situation with the guard and the child?" she asked. "Wellington has it handled," Supervisor Davis replied. "The little girl crossed the barrier accidentally, but there's no threat. She has special needs, and Wellington is managing the situation with appropriate sensitivity." Sarah nodded but continued watching. She had heard about Officer Wellington. He was known for his professionalism and his particular skill in handling delicate situations. The royal family valued guards who could balance security needs with public relations, especially when dealing with children or vulnerable individuals. Back at the barrier, Emma was becoming more animated in her conversation with James. "Do you really live in the palace?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Not quite," James chuckled. "I work here, protecting the Queen and her family. It's a very important job, but I go home to my own house at the end of each day, like my mama goes home after cleaning the big buildings." Emma said, making an innocent connection that touched James's heart. Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had spent so much time protecting Emma from a world that didn't always understand her, but here was a stranger treating her daughter with such respect and kindness. It reminded her why she had worked so hard to bring Emma on this trip, to show her that the world was full of good people and magical possibilities. James knelt down again, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. "Emma, you mentioned that you wanted to visit the Queen. While I can't promise she'll come out to meet you personally, would you like to see something that might be almost as special?" Emma nodded eagerly, bouncing slightly on her toes with excitement. "The Queen has many beautiful guards who work very hard to keep her safe," James continued, "and sometimes when very special visitors come from very far away, we like to show them how much we appreciate their visit." The crowd around them had grown quiet, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Other tourists had stopped, their own sightseeing, to watch this unexpected interaction between a royal guard and a little girl with special needs. Sarah Chen, still observing from the palace steps, found herself smiling. She had seen thousands of tourist interactions over the years, but there was something uniquely touching about this scene. The guard was handling the situation with exactly the kind of grace and humanity that the royal family valued. She made a decision that would turn Emma's special moment into something truly extraordinary. Pulling out her phone, she made a call to the officer in charge of ceremonial duties. "This is Sarah Chen," she said quietly into her phone. "We have a situation at the main gate that might benefit from some ceremonial recognition. Can you coordinate with the guards for a special presentation?" As Sarah spoke, James continued his conversation with Emma, unaware that forces within the palace were already working to make this encounter even more meaningful. Sometimes, the most beautiful moments happened when compassion met opportunity, and today was going to be one of those rare, perfect days. Within minutes of Sarah Chen's phone call, something remarkable began to happen at Buckingham Palace. The ceremonial officer, Captain Morrison, quickly understood the situation and began coordinating what would become an impromptu honor ceremony. Word spread quietly among the guards on duty, and those who could be spared from their posts began moving into position. James, still speaking with Emma at the barrier, noticed the subtle changes in activity around the palace grounds. His trained eye caught the movement of his fellow guards, but he wasn't sure what was being planned. He continued engaging Emma in conversation, asking about her trip from Texas and her favorite things about London. "We went on a big red bus yesterday," Emma told him excitedly, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. "And we saw Big Ben. It's really, really tall. And we ate fish and chips, but I like the chips better than the fish." Sophia watched her daughter's animated conversation with growing amazement. Emma was completely comfortable with James, chatting as if they were old friends. It reminded Sophia of how Emma interacted with her speech therapist back home, open, trusting, and eager to share her experiences. The crowd of tourists had grown larger, drawn by the unusual scene of a Queen's Guard having such an extended, friendly conversation with a visitor. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders for better views, and several people were live-streaming the interaction on social media. But the atmosphere remained respectful, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something special. Suddenly, Emma pointed toward the palace with excitement. "Look, more guards are coming." James turned to see 4 of his fellow guards marching in formation toward their position. They moved with the precise, ceremonial steps that tourists love to photograph. But James realized this wasn't a routine patrol or changing of the guard. This was something being done specifically for Emma. Captain Morrison approached James and whispered briefly in his ear. James's face broke into a wide smile as he understood what was about to happen. He turned back to Emma, who was watching the approaching guards with wide-eyed fascination. "Emma," James said formally, "it appears that the Queen's Guard would like to present you with a special honor in recognition of your long journey from Texas and your kind heart." Emma looked confused, but excited. "An honor like a medal?" "Something like that," James said, winking at Sophia, who now had tears streaming down her cheeks. The 4 guards formed a semicircle around Emma, their red uniforms brilliant in the morning sun. Captain Morrison stepped forward, carrying a small, official-looking scroll tied with a red ribbon. The crowd fell completely silent, sensing the solemnity of the moment. "Miss Emma Martinez," Captain Morrison announced in a clear, carrying voice. "By the authority vested in me by Her Majesty's Guard, I hereby recognize you as an honorary friend of the palace, in appreciation of your joyful spirit, your kind heart, and your reminder to all of us about what truly matters in this world." Emma looked up at her mother with confusion and wonder. "Mama, what does that mean?" Sophia knelt beside her daughter, wiping away her own tears. "It means they think you're very special, Mija, just like I always told you." Captain Morrison unrolled the scroll, which had been quickly prepared by palace staff, and began reading. "Emma Martinez, age 8 of Texas, United States, is hereby granted the honorary title of Friend of Buckingham Palace, with all the respect and admiration that such a title deserves." As he finished reading, something even more extraordinary happened. James stepped forward and, in a gesture that would be talked about for years to come, removed one of his ceremonial buttons from his red tunic. It was a small golden button bearing the royal crest. "Emma," he said gently, "this button has been on my uniform while I protected the Queen. I would be honored if you would accept it as a gift, so you'll always remember that you have friends here at the palace." Emma carefully took the button, holding it like the treasure it had just become. "This was really on your uniform while you protected the Queen?" "It was," James confirmed. "And every time you look at it, I want you to remember that you are brave, you are kind, and you are very, very special." The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Tourists from dozens of countries, speaking different languages and coming from different cultures, were united in this moment of pure human connection. Several people were openly crying, moved by the unexpected beauty of what they had just witnessed. But the ceremony wasn't over yet. The 4 guards who had formed the semicircle now stepped forward in unison and offered Emma a formal salute, the same salute they would give to members of the royal family. The sight of these imposing figures in their magnificent uniforms, saluting a little girl with Down syndrome, was breathtaking. Emma, not quite understanding the full significance but sensing the importance of the moment, attempted her own salute in return. Her small hand went to her forehead in a gesture that was more adorable than military, but it was executed with such seriousness and pride that it brought fresh tears to many eyes in the crowd. Sarah Chen, watching from the palace steps, knew that this moment would be remembered and shared around the world. But more importantly, she knew that it represented the very best of what the royal family and their staff could be. Servants who understood that true nobility came from how you treated the most vulnerable members of society. As the ceremony concluded and the guards began to return to their positions, Emma clutched her golden button and looked up at James with pure adoration. "Thank you for being my friend," she said simply. "Thank you for being mine," James replied, knowing that this little girl had given him far more than he had given her. The news of Emma's special ceremony spread through London faster than anyone could have imagined. Several tourists had live-streamed the entire event on social media, and within hours, videos of the little girl receiving her honorary title and the guard's salute were being shared around the world. Emma at the palace began trending on multiple platforms, with people from every continent sharing the heartwarming story. Back at their hotel that evening, Sophia helped Emma carefully place the golden button in a small jewelry box she had brought for special souvenirs. Emma had carried the button clutched in her small hand for the rest of the day, showing it to anyone who would look and retelling the story of her friend James dozens of times. "Mama," Emma said as Sophia tucked her into bed, "why did the guards think I was special enough for a ceremony?" Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Because you have something very precious, Mija. You have a pure heart that sees good in everyone and everything. You remind people of what's really important in life." "But lots of people have good hearts," Emma said thoughtfully. "Yes, they do," Sophia agreed. "But not everyone shows it as clearly as you do. You don't hide your feelings or pretend to be someone you're not. When you're happy, everyone can see it. When You want to help, you just do it. That's a gift. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, the day shift of guards was ending, and James was finally able to check his personal phone. He was amazed to discover dozens of messages from friends and family who had seen the videos online. His mother had called him 3 times, and his brother Michael had left an excited voicemail about seeing him on the internet. But the most meaningful message came from Captain Morrison, who had pulled James aside before he left for the day. "Wellington," he had said, "what you did today exemplified the very best of what we're supposed to be. The royal family has been informed about the incident, and they wanted me to express their appreciation for how you handled the situation." James had been nervous about potential disciplinary action for breaking protocol, but instead he was being commended. It reinforced his belief that doing the right thing, even when it meant bending rules, was always the correct choice. The story continued to grow throughout the week. News outlets picked up the footage and began running features about the little girl who touched royal hearts. But unlike many viral stories that exploited children for entertainment, this coverage felt respectful and inspiring. Reporters focused on the kindness shown by the guards and the dignity with which Emma had handled her moment in the spotlight. Several Down syndrome advocacy organizations reached out to Sophia, asking if they could share Emma's story to inspire other families. Sophia agreed, hoping that seeing Emma's joyful interaction with the world might encourage other parents to believe in their children's potential. The most surprising development came 3 days after their palace visit. A formal invitation arrived at their hotel, delivered by a palace courier. Sarah Chen had arranged for Emma and Sophia to receive a private tour of the palace gardens, along with a proper afternoon tea in one of the smaller reception rooms. The appointed day, Emma dressed in her favorite blue dress, the one she called her princess dress, and carefully pinned the golden button to her collar. Sophia had helped her practice walking slowly and using her indoor voice for the palace visit. James, who had requested to be present for the tour, met them at a side entrance to the palace grounds. Emma's face lit up when she saw him in his dress uniform. "James, you're here." "Of course I'm here," he said, offering Emma his arm like a proper gentleman. "I promised to show you something special, and today we're going to see where the Queen actually lives." The private tour was magical. Emma saw rooms filled with priceless artwork, chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, and furniture that was hundreds of years old. But what impressed her most were the gardens. Acres of perfectly maintained flowers, trees, and lawns where the royal family could walk in private. During afternoon tea, served on delicate china with tiny sandwiches and pastries, Emma asked James about his brother Michael. "Does he like adventures like this too?" "He loves adventures," James replied. "And actually, he wanted me to give you something." James pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside was a friendship bracelet that Michael had made, along with a note that said, "For Emma, my new friend who lives far away." Emma was delighted with the bracelet and immediately asked her mother to help her put it on. "Now I have 2 special friends in London," she said happily. As their palace adventure came to an end, Sarah Chen presented Emma with an official photograph of her ceremony with the guards signed by all 5 officers who had participated. She also gave Sophia a formal letter stating that Emma would always be welcome to visit the palace whenever she returned to London. "This has been the most beautiful day of my life," Emma told everyone as they prepared to leave. "I feel like a real princess." "You are a real princess," James assured her, "not because of titles or ceremonies, but because of who you are inside." As they walked back through London that evening, Sophia realized that their vacation had become something far more significant than a simple tourist trip. Emma had been recognized not in spite of her disability, but because her differences had allowed her to approach the world with a pure heart that touched everyone she met. The golden button on Emma's collar caught the evening light as they walked, a tangible reminder that sometimes the most important barriers to cross are the ones in people's hearts and minds. And sometimes, it takes someone special to show the world how easy it can be to let love and acceptance win. 6 months after their return to Texas, Emma's story continued to create ripples of positive change that reached far beyond anyone's expectations. The video of her ceremony at Buckingham Palace had been viewed millions of times worldwide, and Emma had become an unexpected ambassador for inclusion and acceptance. Back in their small Texas town, Emma had returned to school as something of a local celebrity. Her classmates, who had sometimes struggled to understand her differences, now saw her as the girl who had been honored by the Queen's Guard. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, used Emma's story as a lesson about kindness and courage, helping all the children understand that everyone has something special to contribute. Emma kept the golden button in a place of honor on her dresser, next to a framed photo of her with the guards and the friendship bracelet from Michael. Every morning she would touch the button and remember what James had told her about being brave and kind. It had become her daily reminder that she was valued and loved. Sophia had been invited to speak at several conferences about raising children with special needs. She shared Emma's story not to boast, but to encourage other parents to believe in their children's potential and to never underestimate the power of inclusion. Emma didn't change that day at the palace, Sophia would tell her audiences. The world around her changed by seeing her clearly for the first time. Meanwhile, in London, James's life had also been transformed by that morning at the palace gates. His act of compassion had been recognized with a commendation from the Queen herself, but more importantly, it had reinforced his understanding of what true service meant. He had been promoted to a training position, where he worked with new guards to help them understand that protecting the royal family meant serving all the people with dignity and respect. James regularly exchanged emails with Emma, sharing photos and stories about his brother Michael, who had become fascinated with Emma's adventure. Michael had started his own project of making friendship bracelets for children with special needs in their local community, inspired by the connection he felt with a little girl he had never met, but considered a true friend. The story had also reached the royal family directly. While they rarely commented publicly on individual interactions with the public, palace sources confirmed that the Queen had been personally moved by the video of Emma's ceremony. The monarch, known for her dedication to serving others, had reportedly said that James's actions represented the very best traditions of the palace guard. Sarah Chen had used Emma's story as a case study in her presentations to other royal households around the world, demonstrating how small acts of kindness could create powerful positive publicity while staying true to the values that monarchy should represent. Several other palaces had implemented new protocols for interacting with visitors who might need special consideration. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the broader conversation about people with disabilities. Emma's joyful, confident interaction with the world had challenged many people's assumptions about what individuals with Down syndrome could achieve. The video comments were filled with stories from other families, sharing their own experiences and celebrating their children's accomplishments. Dr. Patricia Williams, a developmental pediatrician who specialized in Down syndrome, wrote an article about Emma's story for a medical journal. "What we see in this remarkable interaction," she wrote, "is the power of seeing the person first, not the disability." Emma's joy and confidence remind us that inclusion isn't just beneficial for individuals with special needs. It enriches everyone involved. A year after their trip, Emma and Sophia received an unexpected phone call. James was planning to visit the United States for his brother's wedding, and he wondered if he might be able to stop in Texas to visit his young friend. Emma's excitement was impossible to contain when her mother told her the news. When James arrived at their small apartment, he was struck by how much Emma had grown and matured. She showed him around her room, introduced him to her collection of books about England, and proudly demonstrated how much her speech had improved. But her genuine warmth and infectious joy remained exactly the same. "I still have your button," she told him seriously, showing him the treasured memento. "And I still remember everything you taught me about being brave." "What did I teach you about being brave?" James asked, curious to hear her perspective. "That being brave isn't about not being scared," Emma said thoughtfully. "It's about being kind even when other people might not understand you, and about being yourself even when you're different from everyone else." James was amazed by her insight. That's exactly right, Emma. And you've been teaching people the same lesson. During his visit, James met Emma's classmates, her teachers, and several other families in the community who had children with special needs. He was struck by how Emma's story had created a more inclusive environment for everyone. Children who might have been overlooked or excluded were now being celebrated for their unique qualities and contributions. On his last day in Texas, James and Emma visited her school, where he spoke to the students about service, kindness, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Emma stood beside him, beaming with pride as her friends shared their story with her classmates. Sometimes, James told the children, the most important thing you can do is simply be kind to someone who might be different from you. You never know how much that kindness might mean, or how far it might spread. As James prepared to return to London, Emma gave him a drawing she had made of the two of them standing together in front of Buckingham Palace. At the bottom, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for being my friend and showing me that barriers can't stop kindness." The drawing now hangs in James's quarters at the palace, a daily reminder of the day when a little girl with special needs taught a Queen's Guard that the most important walls to bring down are the ones in people's hearts. Emma's story continues to inspire people around the world, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of human connection can create the biggest changes of all. Their friendship, born in a moment of crossed barriers and opened hearts, remains a testament to the beautiful things that happen when we choose to see each other with compassion and treat one another with dignity, regardless of our differences.